the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is part 2 of the players of Cameroon, the final selections. Here we go. Hello and welcome back to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. We're back for part 2 of our mediacast on the players of the 2023 African Cup. This episode deals with the final selections of Cameroon. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. And our decisions are based mostly on their participation over the past 2 years, especially since the World Cup in 2022 for Cameroon, but we did consider a few other factors as well. However, we ran out of time to do part 2 for some of the teams of the African Cup, so today we're going to go back and review that to complete the collection, as it were. The tournament by now has been played, but we are going to take the perspective of just before the tournament here, as if we were doing the mediacast when we intended to. So the mediacast here is divided into 3 sections. Section 1 is some preliminary information, including a look at the games played just before the Cup. Section 2 is the main part of the mediacast, a review of the preliminary and final roster that was released, which we'll compare to the list that we compiled in part 1. And in section 3, we will summarize reviewing surprise selections and non-selections, and any new players making the final squad, and updating on injuries. And we'll end with a revised version of our spotlight review, our predictions of who we think will be the starters. Okay, let's jump right in. So section 1, taking a look at the squad here. So 27 players allowed for the Cup. That was actually raised from 23 to 27 in mid-December, just before the Cup. And Cameroon put out a squad of 49 players there. So that means they would have to cut 22 of the players. 22 of the players to reach the final squad. So there we have it. And many of those on the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut, were actually in our possible but unlikely category, or in our soccer files as seemingly off the squad. However, we didn't bring those players into part 1 because we didn't want to complicate matters. However, since they and some new players did make the squad, we're just going to mention them by name, just by name only, because they're obviously still part of the picture to some degree. All right, let's move on to games here. They had 2 World Cup qualifiers in November, and we're not really interested in the results there. The 2 teams they played were firstly Mauritius and then Libya, and after that we had 1 pre-tournament friendly. Actually, they had 2 friendlies scheduled, or I don't know if they were both scheduled or one replaced the other because they were just a day apart. So originally it was supposed to be with Equatorial Guinea, but that game was cancelled, and instead they played Zambia on January 9th. So the Equatorial Guinea game scheduled for January 8th. So I'm guessing actually, because those dates are so close, that they set up the game with Gambia after the Equatorial Guinea game was cancelled. Anyway, we're going to look at the lineups for those 3 games. And as I say, not interested in the results, but we're interested particularly in the players that use, and hoping that will give us some indication as to who the starters are going to be. Okay, so that completes our business for section 1. Let's move on to section 2, the main part of the mediacast here. And yes, we have up on the YouTube graphic the list that we compiled in part 1. And I'll read out the names for people who are listening to a podcast version. So we begin with manager Rigobert Song. And at that time, we actually weren't 100% that he would be selected. He's a bit of a controversial figure I've seen him arguing on the team with some of the players, and we saw that he had a bit of a disagreement there with Andre Onana in the last cup. But anyway, he had survived, and will be guiding them through this cup. So we'll call that a selection, as it were, and we'll get rid of some information we had there from part one. The previous manager. So Rigobert's on guiding them through the tournament. Let's look at what we had for goalkeepers. So we had a definite candidate in Davis Ipasi, and two likely candidates in Andre Onana and Fabrice Ondoa, and then a possible but unlikely candidate in Simon Omosola. And we did talk about starters there in that mediacast, but we're gonna address that at the end here. So let's see who made it among these players. So David Ipasi, the definite candidate, was selected. Andre Onana, the likely candidate, also selected, and the other likely candidate, Fabrice Ondoa, selected. Simon Omosola, the possible but unlikely candidate, was selected for the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut. And we have a new candidate here. Actually, we shouldn't call him new. He should have been on our list, actually, because he was brought to the 2022 World Cup. So we should have had him on our list, but he actually hadn't appeared for the national team, even on the bench, since the World Cup. That's probably why he wasn't on our list. But here he is again. So we'll put him in the new category. And it is Simon Ngapan Duetenbu. That is a real mouthful of a name. And surprisingly, he was selected not only for the preliminary, but for the final squad. So that means they're bringing 4 goalkeepers to the team here. And looks like they're grooming this Simon Ngapan Duetenbu for the future. He's just 21 years old and plays for Marseille in France, Marseille's B team, and with their youth club. And as I said, they brought him to the World Cup. So perhaps with an eye to the future there, and surprisingly bringing 4 keepers. Okay, so we have David Ipasi, Andre Onana, Fabrice Ondoa, and Simon Ngapan Duetenbu as our 4 keepers. And we'll talk about who we think are going to be starting at the end. But let's look at the games in November and January and see who was the starter. So Andre Onana making it back into the squad after his spat with Rigobert Song. He did come back, as we talked about in part 1, and he started the first game. The second game was Fabrice Onana, and then the third game against Zambia was Ngapan Duetenbu starting that game. So that leaves us with a question as to who we expect to be the starter. Ironically, our definite candidate, Davis Ipasi, not used in any of those games, but we never really did see him as a starter. He was definite because he was consistently called up, though not necessarily as a starter. Personally, I still favor Onana there, but we'll have to talk about that at the end. Let's go to defense and central defenders. So we had on our list a definite candidate in Jean-Charles Castelletto, and then we had 2 likely candidates in Christopher Wu and Umar Gonzalez. 2 possible candidates, Harold Makudi and Nicholas Nkulu. And then we, for some reason, had a seemingly off-the-squad player on our list. I can't remember why we put him there, but Michael Ngadu there on the list. Let's see who made it. John Charles Castelletto, the definite candidate, was selected. Both of the likely candidates, Christopher Wu and Umar Gonzalez, both making the final squad there. And the 2 possible candidates, the first one, Harold Nkudi, Mukudi was selected. However, Nicholas Nkulu only selected for the preliminary squad there. And Ngadu not selected even for the preliminary squad there. We do have one player added to the squad, just the preliminary squad, but we'll just throw him in here because he may factor in the future, and that is Enzo Boyomo. Enzo Boyomo. So keep that in mind. He may pop up in the future. Okay, let's see who made up the central defense in the game. So in game one against Mauritius, in the first World Cup qualifier, a three-man central defense made up of our definite and likely candidates. So it's Umar Gonzalez in the middle, Christopher Wu on the left, and Castelletto on the right of that three-man central defense. They went back to a two-man central defense there, but still we have all three players. It's Wu and Gonzalez in central defense, but we still see Castelletto. He's playing as a right back in this second game there against Libya. And it's a little hard for me to tell because I didn't have many sources for the other game, for the game against Zambia. There's kind of limited information, but I do see Gonzalez on the list there. That's the only one of the players on our list that I see. I'm guessing he was a central defender, but that's the game where we have the goalie Ngapan Duetenbu starting. So it looks like a bit of an experimental game in this case. So the only familiar name there is Gonzalez. Okay, let's go to the left back position, and here we had no definite candidates here, but we had two likely candidates. The first one, Nuhu Tolo, and the second one, Darlin Yongwa. We also have on our list a possible but unlikely candidate in Frank Atsama, and then seemingly off the squad, Enzo Ibose. In truth, we didn't add all of the players we have in the soccer files here, but for some reason, we put those players in, maybe because they had been called up to the squad fairly recently. Anyway, let's take a look. I should get rid of the highlights there. Those are kind of our predictions if you're looking at the YouTube here. Those were our predictions as starters. We'll do that at the end in this part. Anyway, our first likely candidate, Nuhu Tolo, was selected for the squad, and the second one, Darlin Yongwa, also selected for the final squad. Possible but unlikely candidate Frank Atsama was selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut. And then Enzo Ibos not making even the preliminary squad. Here we have two new candidates. Again, we're kind of doing this with an eye to the future. They may pop up in the future. We'll just mention the names. Leon Bell and Mahamadou Abubakar Nagida. Both of those selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And we may see them down the road. Okay, let's see who lined up as a left back. Well, we saw it was a three-man defense in the first game, and that often means the left back pushes up to a left winger, and that's the case. It was Yongwa playing as a left winger in the first game against Mauritius. Against Libya, they went back to the four-man defense. It was Yongwa again on the left side, so he's looking more like a starter there. And again, I don't recognize any of our candidates in the third game, so a bit experimental. However, it's not even the new players that we have. So actually, a couple of these names I don't recognize at all. Anyway, we won't make too much of that. We'll move on instead to right backs, where we have Why do we have John Castelletto here? For some reason, in part one, we had the central defender, John Charles Castelletto, also on our list as the likely right back. So just going to see what we said about him. Obviously, he played as right back during this period. So that must be why we put him there. I don't actually have the note, though. So anyway, John Charles Castelletto, and we saw that in game one, that he actually did line up as the right back. But we've already dealt with him in terms of his selection for the squad. We'll just highlight him in green again here. So we might see Castelletto lining up on the right. Otherwise, we had four possible candidates for the position, and it's Junior Chamadou, Olivier Mbezo, Malcolm Bokali, and Enzo Chato. All of those selected. All of those possible candidates on our list. As a possible but unlikely candidate, we have Collins Fay, a veteran for the team, but hadn't played much recently, so we thought he was possible but unlikely. Let's see who made it. So we have Junior Chamadou making the squad. Also, Malcolm Bokali did make the squad. Olivia Mbezo, our second candidate, just the preliminary squad for him, but not the final squad. But our fourth candidate, Enzo Chato, was selected for the squad. That's an awful lot of right backs to have, especially since central defender Castelletto sometimes steps in. Faye Collins, our possible but unlikely candidate, was selected for the preliminary squad, but not for the final squad. So a bit of a changing of the guard there. And let's go and look and see. As we said in game one, the three-man defense, it was Junior Chamadou lining up as not a right back, but a right midfielder there. In the second game, that is the game where we saw Castelletto used as a right back. And in the other game, we see several of these players used. Those were the names I said were unfamiliar. But we see Chamadou, Chato, and Bokali. So all of our three possible candidates used in the game. I'm guessing one of those, or they were used as a central defender and as a left back as well, those players playing out of position, but they all got a start there in that friendly. So it does look like that friendly with Zambia. They're just giving these kind of backup players a bit of a run out. Okay, we are finished with defense, so we move on to midfield, and we do have one player we coded as a versatile midfielder because he pops up kind of all over the place, and that is Andre Zambo Anguissa. And we had him as a definite candidate, so no surprise that he was selected for the squad. So we'll probably see his name coming up, but we'll take a look and see if he appears on the field after we do defensive and central midfielders. So defensive midfielders, no definite or likely candidates there, but we have two possible candidates, Gail Ondua and Ivan Neyu. So Gail Ondua selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. Ivan Neyu, on the other hand, selected for the final squad. We also had a possible but unlikely candidate, Martin Hongla, and he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. And finally, we had a new candidate here, only as far as the preliminary squad goes, but it is the 20-year-old Jean-Eric Morceau making the preliminary squad. So again, a name we might come up, or we might see in the future. Okay, that is defensive midfielders, but we're going to look at central midfielders before we review the games leading up to the Cup. And here we had a definite candidate in Olivier Ncham. So a definite candidate there. No likely candidates, but then 4 possible candidates. The first one, Samuel Umguet, then Pierre Koundé, Olivia Kemen, and Ben Elliott. And if you are looking at the YouTube, I should say that if their names are in a black text, that means they've been through a tournament. And if it's a gray text, they haven't. So our last 2 candidates there, Kemen and Elliott, new to the squad, hadn't been through a tournament. Our definite candidate, Olivia Ncham, was selected for the final squad. The first of our 4 candidates, in fact, the first 2, Umguet and Pierre Koundé, neither of those selected for the final squad, both making the preliminary squad. So a bit of a changing of the guards in central midfield here, because the other 2 possible candidates, Olivier Kemen and Ben Elliott, I'd seen his name as Benjamin Elliott also, both making the squad. So 3 central midfielders, then along with the 1 defensive midfielder. And I think we have a new candidate here. No, it was the defensive midfielder, Morsu, who we introduced already only on the preliminary squad. So there, 4 in all in the central midfield. That's a little less than usual, but let's look and see. So the first game was a 3-2-2-2-1 formation, which is a variation of a 3-4-3, but the 2 midfielders are more defensive in nature, and it is Anguissa. Okay, so we bring in our versatile midfielder to make 5 kind of central and defensive midfielders. Anguissa alongside Neyu, our possible defensive midfielder there. In the second game against Libya, it's a 4-2-3-1, so also 2 defensive midfielders, and this time we have Anguissa again, this time paired alongside Olivia Ncham there. Okay, and then the last game, I don't actually have a kind of a graphic for it. That's why I'm kind of struggling to figure out who is who. But in that last game, we do see Ivan Neyu again, and he is paired with Benjamin Elliott. So again, a bit of an experimental squad as far as that goes. And we see one more experimental player, which I'll get to in a second when we introduce him. First, though, let's look at the left midfielders and right midfielders. We don't really see this position much anymore. And we only had 1 possible but unlikely candidate here, and it was Arnaud Souchin-Djoum. But he wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad. We had him as possible but unlikely. Right midfielders also, we had none. So we can finish off the midfield here, but I do have 1 more to add with a general midfielder. Actually, hang on, where did he go? Where's my man? Okay, here we go. Our general midfielder, and it is Wilfried Douala. So this was quite a surprise. On some sources, he doesn't even have a page, which for someone making the final squad is a bit of a surprise on those sources. But anyway, it is Wilfried Nathan Douala. And I see a couple of spellings for his name, so it might actually be a bit different. But surprisingly, making the squad, he plays for actually a fairly small club in Cameroon on top of it, and he had been never appeared for the national team at any level until being named to the squad. So he must have done a hell of a job with his club, Victoria United Limbe in Cameroon, to catch the attention of the senior national team. But there we have it, and he's the player who we saw. or who he did appear on the field in the friendly. I said it was a bit experimental, so it looks like he got his first cap there in that friendly against Zambia in January. So that's a bit of an interesting story. We'll have to see if he gets on the field. Meanwhile, we move to left wingers, or we'll say the left attacking midfield. That is left wingers, left attacking midfield, and even left forwards in some cases. And here we have, what do we have? A likely candidate in Jerome Ngom Mbakali. Where am I in my list? Okay, there I am. We have a possible candidate in George Kevin Nkudu. Those are the only two candidates. And a bit of a surprise here, Jerome Ngom Mbakali not selected for the final squad, just for the preliminary squad. We had him, as I saw, as a likely candidate. The possible candidate, George Kevin Nkudu, was selected for the final squad. So they just bring one left winger here, unless the player I just mentioned, Wilfried Douala, is a left winger. We just have him coded as a midfielder. Hasn't played enough for us really to know where he is at. So just the one player over at left wing. I'm just going to check the games to see who played in this position. And it's actually the forward, Toko Ekambi, playing as the left attacking midfielder in the first game, so out of position. And then oddly, we have is it the right back, Chamadu? That's really odd. I can hardly believe it. I'm just going back to make sure, because yeah, it's the right back, Junior Chamadu, playing as a left attacking midfielder. So that's it'll be interesting to see how he's used in the cup. Meanwhile, we have the game against Zambia, and here we see Toko Ekambi again. Although I'm not sure he's playing as a left winger. The source that I'm using has 4 forwards, so I doubt it. But he could be playing on the left. But we do know Toko Ekambi moves around, so can't be dead sure. Anyway, I'll let you know the other players as they come up there. Let's move over to the right wing, and here we had a definite candidate in Brian Mbumo. I don't know what's wrong with my lips here. And we have a likely candidate in Kevin Soni. Those are the two candidates. Let's see. Brian Mbumo, I should know his name because he's in the Premier League, so I see him every week. Brian Mbumo. Was not selected for the final squad, just for the preliminary squad there. That's because of an injury, which we'll talk about in section 3. Kevin Soni, I don't know why we had him as a likely candidate. Actually, he should be, we should have put him at the seemingly off the squad level, because he last played in June 2022. So nowhere near likely, and he wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad there, Kevin Soni. So Brian Mbumo, the only candidate here, and not selected. However, we do have a new candidate brought in, and this is Francois Moug. It's spelled M-U-G-H-E. Francois Moug. He plays for Marseille in France. But a bit of news on him in part 3. Let's take a look at the games and see what we have. So when Mbumo was fit, he was starting as the right attacking midfielder in the first World Cup qualifier there. In the second game against Libya, we have Nkudu lining up as the right attacking midfielder. And again, we're not sure exactly where they were stationed, but none of the players we mentioned here do we see as a forward, or I'm guessing as a right attacking midfielder. So we'll wait and see, because their names will come up. Okay, that is it for right backs. And Let's move on to the forward line. We included kind of central attacking midfielders among the forwards. No definite or likely candidates here, but we did have two possible candidates in Eric Choupo-Moting or Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, and then Clinton and Jay. Clinton and Jay always seems to be popping up there, and seemingly off the squad, Christian Basagog. Last appeared in the 2022 World Cup, but hadn't appeared since. Now some strange goings on here too. Choupo-Moting not selected, but again he was only a possible candidate. But Clinton Njai was selected, as he always seems to be, selected there ahead of Choupo-Moting. Meanwhile, Christian Basagog seems truly off the squad now, not selected even for the preliminary squad. So there, one right attacking midfielder and one central attacking midfielder. We do, though, have one candidate listed as a secondary striker. That was Lionel Atiba, and he actually was selected for the squad. He was just at the possible level, but selected for the final squad. So I think it's going to be forwards kind of covering those attacking positions here. And we do have a lot of them. We have two likely candidates. The first one, Vincent Boubacar. And the second one, Carl Toko Ekambi, who we've already seen moving around the field a bit, starting as a left attacking midfielder. And then we have three possible candidates, Mumi Ngamalu, Frank Magri, and Faris Mumbagna. All three of those at the possible level. And two candidates at the possible but unlikely level, Ignatius Ganago and Stefan Bahoken. Let's look and see which of these made it. So Vincent Boubacar was selected, and he is the captain of the team. Also, Toko Ekambi selected for the final squad, so no surprise there. Let's look at our three possible candidates. We have Mumi Ngamalu, and he was selected for the squad. Oh, no, wait, a bit of a story on him. He was not selected for the final squad, just for the preliminary squad there. And Frank Magri was selected for the final squad, as was Faris Mumbagna. So a lot of these players selected, reinforcing our conviction that they are covering the left attacking and right attacking side of the field. Our possible but unlikely Ignatius Ganago, not selected for the squad. However, Stefan Bahoken did at least make the preliminary squad there. And we have three new candidates to add. They only made it to the preliminary squad, so we'll just kind of throw their names out and leave it at that. The first one is Warren Fosing, playing in Cameroon. The second one, Emmanuel Mahop, or Emmanuel Mahop de Congo, also playing in Cameroon. The third one actually is a little bit interesting, so just for fun, I'll tell you, Leandra Tawamba. This poor fellow has been around since 2018, trying to get onto the national squad. He was selected for the preliminary squad for the 2021 African Cup, and otherwise kind of called up here and there throughout. For this cup, he was called up in September 2022. We didn't put him on the list, but here he is appearing on the preliminary squad again, Leandra Tawamba. So I'm kind of hoping for him in the future to be named to the squad. Okay, let's look at the games then. So here we have in the first game against Mauritius a single forward, and it's Mumbagna, one of our possible candidates there, lining up as the forward. in the second, and we did, as we mentioned, had Toko Ekambi as the left attacking midfielder there. In game two, also a single forward, it was Magri here, but we did have Nkudu. No, where are we? Nkudu we met earlier. Nkudu lined up as the right attacking midfielder, and Njayi was the player who played as the central attacking midfielder. So some switches in position there for that game against Libya, and perhaps too many because they tied that game against Libya, a game that they should be winning. Let's look at the game against Zambia, and here we have a lot of the players, or several of the players tried out. So we have Frank Magri on the field, Toko Ekambi also, Umbanya, and our secondary striker Atiba. All of those kind of getting some field time in the game against Zambia. So it looks increasingly clear that that was oh my God, okay, I have been making a terrible mistake, and I've been looking at the substitutes for the Zambia game. So I'm just going to quickly go over it. Maybe I'll save it for the spotlight review and actually tell you who were the starters in that game against Zambia. I felt something was wrong. Okay, let's move on to section 3 then. We're going to begin by kind of summarizing what we have seen in the selections here, and beginning with notable non-selections. So really just one surprise as far as this goes. It is left winger or left attacking midfielder Jerome Ngom Bakali, who we considered a likely candidate, but selected only for the preliminary squad and not the final squad. So we would have expected to see him on the final squad. For surprise inclusions, I guess we could combine this with new players, because these players kind of came out of nowhere. Well, all except Simon Ngabanduetenbu. We should have had him on the list actually, but still hadn't been called up to the team since the World Cup there, and also a fourth goalkeeper. So both of those factors make him a surprise inclusion. Okay, down to new players. We had Wilfried Nathan Douala, the midfielder playing in Cameroon, also a surprise inclusion. Really, it's usually European-based players that make the final squad, but we'll see. Maybe he'll light up the tournament for us. The other one was right winger Francois Muge, but we have some news on him in that he refused the call-up. So he declined the invitation, preferring to progress his career with Marseille. So he was out, and called in to replace him was Mumi Ngamalu, the forward. So I'm going to go back to section 2 and highlight him in yellow. He had just made the preliminary squad, but called in from the preliminary squad to make the final squad there. So Mumu Ngamalu making it to the final squad. Let's do an update on injuries. Well, we only had one that came up in part 1. That was Harold Mukudi, the central defender. We're going to put him in the recovered from injury category, because it kind of suspiciously missed, although he missed 2 international games for his club, he only missed 1 game, and he was back playing 90 minutes in early December. So missed the November games, Mukudi, but his injury, not a concern, and he was named to the squad. More seriously, though, is Brian Mbumo, who was dropped from the preliminary squad due to an ankle injury picked up in early December, which ruled him out for the Cup. So all the way up to the Cup, they knew it was serious enough that they couldn't put him on the final squad. So a big loss there. We had him as a definite candidate, and he had started 10 of their 11 games over the past period. So right wing, kind of a problem, and probably the reason that they tried to bring in Francois Muguet. So still a bit of a problem on the right, and that's why maybe we saw unlikely players over there. Okay, and the last injury date update is Vincent Abubakar. We noted that he had been, I think we must have done, the part one after the November games, because at that time we knew he was injured for the first match in November, but wasn't selected for the second match. However, we can say that he's recovered from that hamstring injury because he played for his club in December, and also, as we'll see, in our botched lineup for the Zambia Cameroon game, he actually was a starter in that game. So it looks like he's fit to go. Okay, let's go with the spotlight review. This is what we had after part one. So we're going to call this one the revised spotlight review. We're going to look back and see if we're making any changes. So we actually have Rigobert Song as a likely but not definite manager, but at this point in time, we would change that to a green highlight as the definite manager. We don't think they're going to change immediately before the tournament here. The goalkeepers, we had Andre Onana and Fabrice Ondoa as the starting keepers. And Onana did start the first game, but actually it was Onana in the next two. He was the one who played against Zambia. So now we are going to leave them both in blue as kind of possible, or even rotating, one or the other, or rotating. But whereas we did kind of favor Onana last time, we now favor Ondoa. In central defense, we didn't really have the guts to put anyone down because there were just kind of names all over the place. And now we're going to be, I guess, equally vague. We're just going to put all four names down. So Jean-Charles Castelletto, who might start as a right back, Christopher Wu, Umar Gonzalez, or Harold Makudi. Because we kind of see them all showing up. So could be a rotation among them. It also could be three at the back, three central defenders, or could be one of them starting out of position, especially Castelletto on the right. So just to review, we did kind of see all of them. To a lesser extent, we didn't see Mukudi in the two November games, but we did see him actually lining up in the first game. So again, I'm not sure what the positions exactly were, but we see Castelletto, Wu, and Makudi as starters there. So we think it could be any of the four of them. Over to left back situation, we have Nuhu Tolo. Sometimes he's called just Nuhu, and Darlin Yonghua, and we had them in blue, kind of one or the other rotating there. And then we saw in the games that it was Yonghua in both of the games. So we would move him up to a definite. In fact, we're going to move him up to a definite because he started. Well, the odd thing is that both of them started the Zambia game in January. So one of them playing out of position. And to add to that, to add to his argument, Yonghua scored a goal in that game. So we're going to change him to green, kind of updating our prediction there. And we'll also put him ahead of Nuhu Tolo. On right back, though, it is a real mess. We did guess John Charles Castelletto. We saw he started there in game one, But then we saw a whole bunch of candidates, 3 different candidates to choose from on the roster, and yet Castelletto, Chamadou is a possibility in the game here. We actually see who do we see? Yes, as we said, we think it was Yonghua or Nuhu, one of the two kind of switched sides over there. So that leads us to conclude that it's very undecided, and we're going to remove even Castelletto from the list because it could be any one of those players. I mean, with 4 candidates there and they use an out of position player, it's clear that they're fairly undecided on right back. Okay, central midfield. We have Andre Zambo Anguissa. That was the only one we had on our list. And we had him as a maybe to likely candidate. We're going to change that now to a definite. He played both of the November games and he was on the field for the Zambia game there. So we're changing him to definite. And we're going to add Olivier Ncham, because he did play in that January friendly, and also he played in the second World Cup qualifier there against Libya, so strengthening his case. But we'll just put him in blue as a maybe to likely starter, unlike Zambo and Anguissa, who we do expect to see a starter. Left wing, where we have seen out of position players there, a little confusing. What do we have? Toko Ikambi playing out of position. He's coded as a forward, and Mumi Ngamalu. That's what we had in part 1. And actually, Ngamalu did start in the January game, whereas Toko Ikambi did not. But we know they're struggling to find a left winger there, so we will stick with what we got there and put both of them, Toko Ikambi and Ngamalu, both as kind of possible to likely. On the right wing, we had one of the sure things we could decide on was Brian Mbumo as the right winger, as a definite, and now we know he's injured, so we're not sure where to go here. But what we do think is that it'll be kind of an out of position player. So again, we know Toko Ikambo moves over the field, and so we're not going to venture a prediction there. However, we also had forwards as kind of a blank. Central attacking midfield, they only use that position once in a while, so we won't put a candidate there. But forwards, now that Vincent Abubakar is back and started in December, we're fairly confident he'll be the starter. He's the captain of the team. Not quite so confident as to put it in green, though. So we're going to put it in blue, Vincent Abubakar. There it is, our spotlight review. Those are our predictions. And because we're doing this media cast after the tournament had started, we can actually look at the lineups for the real thing. So we're going to actually put our predictions to the test here. So we favored Ondoa as the keeper. Let's see who started. It was Ondoa who started the tournament there. So we'll put him as a starter. Okay. So Onana, maybe his fight continues with Rigobert-Song. Who knows? Central defense, we're really curious to see who it'll be. It is Wu and Makudi both starting. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Gonzalez come in future games. We do actually have Jean-Charles Castelletto on the field, and he's starting as right back again. So, almost want to put him. Well, he does play in central defense too. What have I done? The graphics took me by surprise there. Jean-Charles Castelletto starting on the right side there. Okay, on the left side, I think we were increasingly favoring Yonghua there, and he was the starter. So we had put him in green, so good for us predicting that. Central midfield, Anguissa we were fairly sure about, and he did start. It's a 4-3-3 formation with Anguissa actually as the left midfielder. Surprise, surprise, it's Kemen in the middle, Olivier Kemen, central midfielder. We didn't even have him on our list, so that's a surprise starter for us there. And we did have Olivier Ncham, and he did start. He was the right midfielder. So Kemen is the real big surprise there, especially starting right in the centre. On the left wing, we were really not sure, and here we're taken by surprise too, because it is Georges Kevin Nkudu. He's coded as a left winger, but we didn't give him much. Never mind, but there he is. Maybe wouldn't be a surprise to Cameroon fans, but a bit of a surprise for us here. Of course, Brian Mbumo, I thought we had removed him from the list and kind of left no one in replacement. A bit of a surprise here. It is the forward Frank Magri starting as the right attacking midfield. So a surprise starter there. We hadn't predicted that. And for forward, at least give us this win. Vincent Abubakar starting as forward. No, it is not the case. It is Toko Ekambi starting as the forward. So, well, we saw that Abubakar had recovered from his injury, so I'm a bit surprised by that. But anyway, there we have it. I won't call Ekambi a surprise, because we kind of thought he would be on the field. We just didn't think he would replace Vincent Abubakar there. Okay, that is it. So the real detailed spotlight review there, but now you know who made the squad, and that brings us to the end of our look at Cameroon. Just let me put the graphics in place, and I hope I find sometimes I go back and listen to our podcast once I forget some of the details. So I've enjoyed doing this to kind of refresh myself, and I'm probably going to listen to these things before the 2025 African Cup, which takes place in December. That's when we'll revisit Africa next time. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast.